This week may get interesting as we see NVIDIA earnings giving us a 115% implied volatility. And so we have a big move priced in for NVIDIA. Might be affecting things like AMD as well and other semiconductors. And then at the same time, we notice that AMC and GME both have very low expected moves, implied volatility for this week. And so that is something to pay attention to, because as implied volatility drops in stocks like that, that's when something unexpected actually could happen, because we're not expecting a big move. We got a lot to get into as we do some technical analysis for the SPY Qs: Apple, Tesla, Amazon, NVIDIA, AMD, Meta, and we're looking at GME and AMC as well. So let's get into it. First of all, starting off with the SPY, what do we notice from the 2-hour? We're stating in this area how we might move sideways in order to pull back. And what would you say would happen if this MACD curls up? Well, positivity could happen. Maybe we go up towards a weekly expected move of 571.56. That's right, we have the weekly expected moves up on the screen for you in those purple lines. That is our 68% zone for the day. So you do have the upside target of 571.56 to the upside. You do have 552.70 to the downside. So if we do want to pull back further, this area would make some sense. We would run into some gap support if we cut below that level, and you have a 68% chance to land by the end of the week above that purple line. So we'll see what happens with this going forward, as that 2-hour has kind of pulled back with time. Okay, pulling back with time is overall sideways price action. And for tomorrow, we can pay attention to a couple levels as well. We do have 565.10 to the upside for the daily expected move, and 559.16 to the downside for that daily expected move. So not the most implied volatility going into Monday, but we do have a decent amount going on throughout the week, and especially in things like NVIDIA. So what do we need to pay attention to here? Well, if the job isn't done and we need more of a pullback, this is an area we can pay attention to. We could see some structure possibly built up here, still kind of moving sideways overall, and see that left head and right shoulder form. We'll figure that out if it's going to happen. And then a lot is going to depend on NVIDIA earnings. I feel like that's important to note throughout your week, that NVIDIA earnings can really affect the market because NVIDIA holds such a big weight. So looking at this right here, maybe we want to pay attention to what's going on still with the daily scale, right? We talked about this on Saturday a little bit in the macro style video. If we do experience a heavier sell-off, just pay attention if this daily is actually able to roll down on this MACD. That'll be a big hint. But I'm not necessarily leaning towards that. I'm looking for a 2-hour to still be pulling back, or a 4-hour to pull back at some point. Now we can notice that if the 4-hour was to pull back, and that might be a little bit more dramatic, then we could end up back down into the top of our zone, right? We break through a zone, we test the top of it, and then we start to move higher. That is still possible. Maybe we want to develop by going higher throughout the week and then coming down to that point. So one thing to be aware of up here are those divergences on the daily scale. Always got to pay attention to those, as we're still pretty close to that negative territory if we were to roll over. But something you're leaning towards at this moment is overall a pullback. I think still pulling back with time or something like that. So as we look into a 30-minute, this is really going to be able to help us out. If we're going to see that pullback, that downward price action, what's going to first happen is our shortest time frame, the 30-minute, is going to curl down on this MACD and possibly even go negative. So it could be a little bit worse move than this one. That one went negative briefly. This one has the opportunity to go a little bit sooner into negative territory. You notice that little gap between here. So it can go into negative territory a little sooner, meaning this could be a little bit more dramatic than this drop right here, as we have those even highs. So we'll pay attention to that going forward. We'll pay attention to these signals with you. If you need the other weekly ranges for the individual stocks as we're getting through the SPY and the Qs, obviously you'll get those, but on Patreon we do give those out for $7 a month. We give them for all the stocks that we cover on this channel and a few more. So that's good to have on your charts for this week, as we could see some fireworks due to NVIDIA earnings. We could see some major upside due to NVIDIA earnings. We just want to pay attention to the signals, know that that's a 50-50 shot, and then go over into tech stocks and see what we're going to get for the rest of the week. Now, one thing to note is the weekly expected moves for the Qs sitting up here towards 493.14, and you notice there's a thick red line here. That's 492.28. That is the annual expected move. So if we do get outside of that, that would mean by the end of the year we end up down below that red line with a 68% probability. Okay, that's just something you need to know. It doesn't mean that has to happen right when it crosses. It has to. We can see that build up over time and then experience something bad in December, right? So that's not necessarily what to pay attention to, but I just want you to note that it is right next to it this week. So this can be a good level of resistance, that 493.14. And if we are going to get some support, I would expect 466.86 to the downside to hold as some kind of support. Now, the key thing with 466.86, if you see me zoom out, you're going to notice it correlates with these highs in here. And if you've been a part of this channel just for a few days, pretty much, I've been really liking a pullback down to this area. I think that that would be a good move. Noticing that the 30-minute is just now trying to go positive. Well, we would say positivity is the most likely option. So looking at the daily expected moves, we do have 484 to the upside and 476 flat to the downside. So not the biggest move for tomorrow, but we'll see if we're able to really cross through and see that move higher, and then pay attention of any rollovers if that's happening early on in the day, because that could mean the target is the downside halfway through the week, and then we could see some kind of move up with that NVIDIA earnings. So we'll pay attention to it. For the most part, these things roll down, bad things can happen. You're right by negative territory. As we go into a 2-hour, you're going to notice this thing dipping down just a little bit further than the SPY, which is kind of nice, and it's not able to catch up just yet. The SPY is testing those highs. The Qs are not. And a lot of the time that does happen in a major top, so we need to pay attention to the next 2 weeks. And that's all I'm going to say about that. It easily could not be a major top, right? We are very, very much so people who like to say trade like water, trade the signals. Do not get in this habit of thinking, oh, this has to happen, right? Nothing has to happen. Everything is a probability. At any moment, you still have a 1% chance for a crash, a 1% chance for a boom in a stock, right? So you have to take that into consideration and just say, if this 2-hour were to curl up, what the most likely thing is it's heading towards that 493.14. So if this does this, you're more likely to do something like this than to start falling off, right? It just doesn't make sense. How is the momentum fully turning up here? You'd see green bars and you're going to say, oh, this is going to fall down. That just doesn't make sense. So for the most part, you just want to say, if this 2-hour curls up, we can see positivity. As of right now, it's still saying pullback. That's still what I'm leaning towards. Maybe some kind of consolidative move, maybe something down into this area, and we see this kind of scope out like this. It doesn't have to play out how you think. You just want to think of the scenario where you would actually get into a trade. And the scenario where I would get into a trade is if this continues to consolidate even like this, and we see that get really close to that center line and then see that curl up as this line comes down, you see those cross, that would really be a hint to me of some kind of breakout coming, right? Some kind of breakout coming. And that's what I really want to pay attention to. Not necessarily how it forms, but how it is going to set up an opportunity for me. I do not have to take a trade. You guys know I've been saying this for a few days now. I myself have made great money with the short squeeze, right? I've made great stuff with the short squeeze using NVIDIA. Hopefully people, give yourself a thumbs up, a pat on the back if you've been subscribed for that, because we started talking about short squeeze in these areas. And that is when we saw the big drop off. We saw those divergences complete for NVIDIA. And we said, NVIDIA holds a strong weight. Tesla looks like it has some reversals. Google looked like it has a bunch of stocks look like they had some reversal signals in it. And boom, we head to the upside. So that squeeze did end up happening. Thank you so much for being subscribed. I really appreciate you being here and watching this video and giving this video a like. So thank you guys so much for being here. And at the same time, now we have to think that was a great opportunity. That is why we took it. What is this a great opportunity? Even if we would cross up right here, is that still a great opportunity? Well, that is going to make possibly a divergence. I'm not saying you can't play it. It's just more as this develops, I want my next trade to be a great one. I do not want to force myself into any kind of trade because I want to sit there and go, okay, I just had a great one. Why would I sit here and go, okay, I'm going to take this like it's crashing, and then, this just turns up and I lose a lot of money? It's like, no, I want my next trade to be a very easy one. Something people can get in the habit of is making great money on a trade, selling out of that, and then immediately taking a trade right after and saying, okay, now I'm going to make a bunch of money to the downside. No, it's more look for the opportunity, look for how things actually develop, and look for things that will actually reverse around stocks. Does this have a reversal signal in it? No, it does not. It has a pullback signal as of right now. If that starts to escalate, that is when we will really start to pay attention for some kind of bouncing that leads to a rollover. All right, just wanted to keep that in your mind. Now, as we look over at things like Apple, we notice what? More pulling back with time, just really moving sideways here. Now, you do see some little tiny structure in here that could lead to a downfall, so watch out if Apple starts to close below 223.76. We have those weekly ranges for you for Apple and all the other stocks we're about to go through. But for now, you would say I'm in a 2-hour pullback, and that pullback is happening with time. So if I see that next move higher, can that be a solid move? Yes, it can. But we might have a weekly range right above us, and then we go like this, and then what happens? We create a divergence, and then this was actually the better play. Do you see what I mean by being patient? I don't have to play this one. I can wait for a better signal and play this one over here, see some bigger pullback or something like that, and then make good money and see what the signals look like from here. That's what I'm overall getting at. I want my next trade to be a great one. After I have a great trade, the worst thing I can do is set myself back now with some kind of rushed trade, right? I'm practicing patience, something we talk about in the courses a lot, which happen to be 90% off for the next week. Like you literally have to get them this week in order to get that price point of $100 for the technical indicators course, the one that we use to find the short squeeze. Then swing trading as well is down there in the description. So both of those are 90% off just for a few more days. $100 for one, $50 for the other. You can get yourself both of them and really learn how to be a great trader. Give yourself those tools, get to practicing, and then you'll be off to the races, right? So as we look into things like a 30-minute, key thing here, we curled up again, okay? There was a hiccup here that I really don't like when I see it on a 30-minute, but it causes you to have to react. And this is where it's important to be trading like water. We see this curl down right here, this little red bar down here on the histogram crossing over that MACD for a brief moment, but that's overall a positive bar, and we end up turning back up the next bar. So on that next bar, it would say, hey, no reason for upside, next bar, no reason for downside, and we head up from there. Sometimes you have to react that quickly to things, especially if you're taking a trade like you think this is all divergence, which it very well still could be. How we would know is, we like to say this a lot, timing is very important, especially if you are doing options. One of the most important things with trading is your timing. And so that's why you want to manage that risk quickly and say, okay, just in case, let me get out of this because it's not turning down anymore. It's starting to turn back up, which means positivity, and I was taking negativity. So if I wanted to reapply that position again, I would need to see this signal again. I would need to see another drop below that center line, really giving me that curl over, telling me, okay, all these divergences are rounding out. This is just tapering to the upside. Now we're heading down, and boom, that would be a trigger. And if we cross through that about 223 level, that would be a good sign for an overall bigger pullback, and then maybe we're able to build up over time using that weekly range. So weekly ranges become very, very important as we look forward. Now, Tesla gave some great signals down here, and the first one was the divergence point right here. We said, okay, now that's going to possibly break out. It did. It broke through that level that we had drawn. We said we get to this zone, we might reject from there for a retest. We got the retest of this line right here. If I drew it across a little bit cleaner, we got a pretty perfect retest there, and then we see that curl up, and you see that curl up, and it leads to what? Positivity over time. So even though you're seeing these curl downs, you do get that positive move. That 2 hour was able to cross up. It was a great trade. Now at this moment, you see what? A divergence on your MACD, a flatness of the RSI. That tells you a pullback might be coming. That was a little dramatic. So you're glad that you're following these signals, because if you're still holding that 2 hour play and you see a signal like this on a 30-minute, we talk about this in the course a lot as far as when to get out of a trade, when to take profit. So look into that if you're trying to learn before the week starts. As we see here, it's curled back up. That's great and all, but you're going to the next breakdown area, right? We really broke down here. We see where that took place, and where are we? We're right there. So you really have to take that back to see positivity. If you curl over on this MACD, what are you going to do? You're most likely going to head down into this zone again. Maybe we form a divergence, and this is where it's kind of that statement. Is this really the best play? It might be a good play, but I think this play would be the better one, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the better play to form. I'm being patient, and even if it doesn't set up for me this week, one will set up for me next week. I want to be very diligent on saying, I had a great trade. I want to make sure my next one is good too. Then I can have two plays, be in a flow, be practicing patience, and then the next plays will come easier and easier. A lot of the time after a big play, we can get really excited. I want to make sure to be controlling that emotion and saying, okay, now I need to be patient and wait for that next one. It's hard to do. It's genuinely hard to do in this scenario. It is, because we're seeing just some curl ups that lead to some good positivity. And I'm kind of sitting on the sidelines, just sitting there with my hundreds of % gain on that short squeeze. So this was a great play, plays out to the upside, curls up on that 2 hour down here, and we just see what? We see that boom to the upside. So once that curls up, it never curled down till right about here. So right here, pretty perfect take profit there for Tesla. Seeing that back off, if that 2 hour does curl up, positivity. And you know that for Tesla, we've overall been saying 234 is where we're really paying attention. I think 234 would be a great level to get to. Curl down again, convince people we're crashing, and then just curl right back up, giving you the good structure to head higher. Now, it doesn't have to play out like that, but that is something I'm keeping in my mind. Overall, still just following the signals there. Amazon, this one here as well, curling back down on that 2 hour. Okay, getting close to that center line. So if it crosses up, positivity can be there. We reacted up to the breakdown area for Amazon. Very, very good there. Amazon didn't have the best reversal signals in the world, right? We didn't have the best reversal signals. All you pretty much have was a little divergence right here. You can see that on the MACD. You can see that on the RSI. You do have those, but it kind of just leaked higher over time, kind of like it was just squeezing just a little bit while people were selling within this entire squeeze. So I think a lot of people trying to call the top in this. Now, one thing we did notice about Amazon was there is a 30-minute divergence right up here. So was the good play taking this curl up? You might say so. You might say a 30-minute swing trade was a good curl up right here, but did that really have much upside? Well, it gapped higher and then it fell. So the actual better trade was getting the 2 hour pullback, which would be this divergence here leading to downside. And we noticed that that indication was happening right in here. So the position could be taken somewhere in this area, and then downside's the most likely option. That did prove to be the case. And we noticed there is some little tapering down here. So if this 30-minute really wants to, it can make that next move higher. Maybe we even do some cup and handling. Okay, so we have to pay attention if these 30 minutes are curling up, and then see if those 2 hours are curling up as well. Just really paying attention to the signals. As of right now, Amazon still could need to consolidate just a tiny bit more. We'll pay attention to that on Monday as we are live. Make sure you're subscribed with those notifications on so you know when we're live. Now, we're going to just get into NVIDIA. Amazon wasn't the best trade setup, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but you'll notice NVIDIA here really curling down on that 2 hour, mainly pulling back with time, right? We're overall in the same area. Sure, we had a couple hours there of selling, but we're right back where we started from that breakdown. So if this 2 hour does curl up, we could see positivity. If that happens before the earnings, that might mean there's some probabilities for the downside, but we know that earnings is overall a 50-50 flip. It doesn't matter really what the technicals look like. You can look for weakness, and if you feel like you have to absolutely take the play, a lot of the time you'll see a great move. NVIDIA's pricing in 115% implied volatility, so I'd really pay attention to that. And pay attention to what the SPY and the Qs look like at that moment, what volatility looks like at that moment. It might help you out. But me, myself, I don't plan on playing too much with earnings. The only time I would play earnings is overall if I'm seeing pretty much a golden setup. That's the only time that I normally will play earnings, or if I'm doing a fun play. So earnings is a 50-50 game. I know it's enticing because there are bigger moves happening, but we just talked about taking the best possible trade. If you've just had a good one with the short squeeze, you might want to take a good trade. Well, is taking a 50-50 trade very good after just making a good amount of money? No, you can really hurt yourself that way. Something that will help you over time if you're turning into a trader for years and years is staying away from big moves for earnings, looking at a different stock. So what does that mean to me? I could look at something like AMD, SMCI, look at those signals and then react, and they won't see as much volatility if NVIDIA gives bad news or something like that. So that's something to pay attention to. But 2 hour curls up, good things can happen, right? Good things can happen, and then we have to pay attention if any divergences are up here. So looking at a 30-minute, though, we can pay attention to this. It's closing at the high. That's a good sign for positivity continuing next week. 30-minute is positive in positive territory, so the most likely thing here is still upside. Maybe we get some kind of little pullback to make a little bit more structure, but if it has enough right here, it can just break through right now. So that's something to pay attention to, but is it a trap before earnings? That's what we'll be looking into later on throughout our live videos. The good part about NVIDIA, throughout this upward move, I got to take profit multiple times, taking profit, pretty much all of it in this area. I see divergences forming, and we see some kind of drop. That makes total sense, right? So all of this makes sense. We get the divergence on the MACD, not on the RSI at the same time. That tells me what? That tells me this is most likely going to be a bigger pullback, but not some kind of reversal in the trend, right? More probabilities of this just being a solid pullback. But if this pullback needs some structure, watch for that 30-minute to curl down, get into this zone, and then maybe we set up something like this before earnings. That would be interesting. The structure, if we didn't have earnings, would maybe look something like this. right? But since we don't have, or since we have earnings and there's a bunch of implied volatility, if they give some good news, we could stop and not do that right shoulder and just see that price action head to the upside. So something for NVIDIA could be cooking this week. We got to play that out. We got to really see the price action and be reacting quickly and staying away from earnings if we're not confident in our trade. As we look forward into things like AMD, this is more what I think people could be looking at, is looking at stocks that could be affected a little bit by NVIDIA, but not overall going to affect the stock too much. If NVIDIA says, oh, we're not profitable, then that could affect AMD in a negative way. But for NVIDIA, that could really go like that. AMD could just go like this and then curl right back up, and maybe we see some structure. So that's something to pay attention to. We have weekly ranges for this stock as well on the Patreon, and we'll just look at the 2 hour, just overall telling you pullback. So I shouldn't assume some big upward move is happening until this 2 hour pulls up. And it does still have room to get close to that center line and still pull back further. So if we needed one more move down, that would really pull this 2 hour MACD down. And then if that's able to, say, curl up, that would be a better sign for more positivity and a better timing on the trade to catch a big move, maybe to the top of some kind of trend line. Okay, so that's what I'm paying attention to for AMD. As we click over into Meta, this one here has more weakness in it. Okay, guys, Meta does have a double top forming here, confirming with the rejection divergence. If you want to make this clear for yourself, if you start to see a rejection, just go pop over to the hourly, see if that's confirmed. No, okay, now that 2 hour rejection does make sense. What can this do and why is this a bad thing? Well, if it curls up, it's right by that center line, so positivity, awesome. The reason that it's scary though is because this type of signal right here, does curl over dailies a lot of the time, meaning a daily pullback can come. So you see we're closing below the 9. This means we could be pulling back for some time and then see if that next upward move is able to come later on, right? See if that can get down towards the center line. You need to note here though that there are divergences all across this thing. There are divergences all across this right now. So if that does turn down, you do have weakness in momentum and the door is open to see further downside over time, over the next 2 weeks or so. So I would really pay attention to that. But first you got to just say it's still positive. So even if we do cross over, that could just be a pullback, and then maybe we want that next move higher. Maybe you were right in saying, oh, this needs to crash down, but you were wrong with a little bit of the timing, and then it leads into this area. That's what I'd be paying attention to for Meta. Looks like this one could more be a double top on the 2 hour and could experience some weakness to me at this moment with how the charts look right now. And that's the big thing. I know I say that sometimes, but how the charts look right at this moment. A lot of things can change just with another hour of price action come Monday morning. So just pay attention to your signals, and that's why we trade like water. AMC, we talked about this a little bit on Saturday, just saying, hey, this is something different. Now we're going to update these levels for you. Okay, I'm going to give you that updated level for AMC, and we do notice that what's happening here. Well, the implied volatility for AMC is still lower than usual, lower than what it normally has been for the past few, I would say, months, for like 6 months. But as far as it goes for AMC right now, it looks like 551. 551 is where you really need to get above in order to see something crazy. So just spreading out just a tiny bit more implied volatility here, but still low. And the key thing here is these Bollinger Bands are getting really tight. You move from expanding moves, right? And then you contract, and then you contract, and then you contract, and then it explodes in one direction. We don't know which direction that will be, but maybe our MACD can help us out in saying, if I cross up on this MACD, hey, that's a positive trend now. That is a positive trend crossing up for the first time into positive territory on a daily MACD. That means that an overall prolonged move could come. This is why I think there is a higher probability for a gap up from AMC this coming Monday. Now, I'm not saying it has to happen. I just know that this is the type of look a stock like this would have before a big move to the upside. Tight price action, getting above the 200, testing those moving averages, about to curl up on the MACD, RSI poking its head right above the center line. All of that tells me, hey, there could be positivity. Obviously, in the shorter time frames, we need to look at the 2 hour that has crossed up. This is what I was telling people to pay attention to. I said, if the 2 hour can cross up and go positive, that daily is going to cross. Now, what have you noticed? The daily has not crossed yet, but look at the 2 hour. It's not positive yet. Once that 2 hour does go positive, most likely you will be crossing. Like most likely you just need one more green bar like this and it to hold up at that level for the rest of the day, right? So something like 5 510 to 515 could easily cross up that daily MACD, and that's what I'd really pay attention to this week. Obviously, if the 2-hour rotates back down, that means it's not the moment, and that tightness could actually be distributed down. So you really want to make sure you're reacting to that, especially if you have an option play. If you're just holding the stock like I am and things like that, I'm doing both at the same time. So if you're just holding the stock, then you know your plan, right? You already know what you're going to do as far as that goes. GME, a little bit more negative here for GME, and that's a big deal because we are pulling back overall. You're not seeing like major breakdowns or anything like that, but you have seen one move, then you've kind of consolidated. Now are you going to see the next one? And the 2-hour is by that center line. So what you're looking for here from GME is to just curl up on that 2-hour. Curling up on that 2-hour can really help. Maybe AMC helps out with this if it sees some upside here, but we'll pay attention to it. For the most part, this looks like more of a continuation of a 30-minute move or an hourly move. You notice that, what do we do in this area? Well, we break down. All right, you break down with the divergence that we were pointing out, you break down, and then you kind of form this weird head and shoulders in the small price action. We're starting to break through some key levels here. So if we draw this across, we're kind of testing it right now. So it needs to hold up now. As of right now for the 30-minute though, you are looking like negativity is the most probable thing according to your MACD, but the first hour of Monday can really turn things around if that is going to happen. So we'll pay attention to that. As we look forward, something to keep in mind is volatility. Volatility, we talked about this testing the daily 200. The crash indicator is still holding intact. The 50 is above the 200. So if we get a reaction from volatility soon, and this is why I really just wanted to say, September 6th, pay attention to the jobs data, pay attention to the next 2 weeks, because this will tell us a lot, this next move in volatility, if we're going to move higher throughout the year or if we're going to start to really break down, see some kind of bear market. If we start to cross below this, hey, that's great. If we cross below this 200, that means we most likely will see a further squeeze and get down to 1212. But it's this reaction I have to pay attention to. If this reaction takes me through the ceiling, or if this reaction drops and gives me a lower high, that's what I need to pay attention to, because the lower high scenario says we're going to head higher into the end of the year. The blow off, the complete blow off, means you're most likely already experiencing something bad in the market. We know that there's rate cuts coming. It is not different this time, guys. It is still going to be a bad thing with those rate cuts. It means the economy is weakening. We already know the consumer is weak because of inflation, so it makes sense for the economy to be weaker. It just depends pretty much on, are they going to print money and save it, or are we going to see some bad things across the board? That's kind of how I see it. Now, volatility, that's just the main thing I'd pay attention to. Daily start to rotate up. We don't necessarily have reversal signals, but we do have a 2-hour curling down. So the most probable thing for Monday, you made it towards the end of the video, so the most probable thing for Monday is more positivity. You see that from the 2-hour crossing down on volatility. You see those 2 hours kind of winding up, trying to go higher. But is that going to be short-lived, make some kind of divergence like this, and then we just cross right back up into positive territory? That's what I'd be paying attention to in the first couple days of this week. All right, that's something very, very big to watch. Now, a couple things. We notice the PCC is up in elevated levels. We notice that when the PCC is high, right? When the PCC is high during a short squeeze, that means everyone's trying to short the top. They can use that as fuel to send the markets higher. So when everyone is on the put side and the dollar is actually going down with that, that tells you that insiders might actually be buying here. Now, the only problem with this here from the dollar is you have this 2-hour divergence here if that were to rotate up. So really pay attention. If that dollar rotates up and starts to curl up over time, we could be seeing a sell-off for some reason or some kind of flight to cash. Maybe we even squeeze for a long time and we see the dollar and the market going up at the same time, and eventually the market gives that up. So that's something to pay attention to. We're in a key zone for the dollar. If you want to zoom out for a second and just look where we're at for the dollar, a lot of the times, what do we get from this zone? Reactions, 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 reactions. Okay, so if we get one here, what we want to pay attention to is that reaction massive, or is it just a reaction that goes like this and then ends up falling down? That would lead to more positivity throughout the end of the year. But if the dollar just starts to blow up, that would mean people are running to cash for some reason, meaning they're running out of assets for some reason, and that is going to be what to pay attention to with the dollar. So overall, I hope this video was helpful. I think the main takeaway here is trade like water. A lot can happen. We're going to have a crazy couple of weeks, and I think paying attention very closely for the next couple of weeks can really help us in seeing, are we going to head higher over the next few months, or are we going to actually see something bad happen as volatility has created that crash signal? So some key things to pay attention to. NVIDIA earnings is coming out, so that could see some big things, and we'll go over that during the live video a bunch. Make sure to ask me to look at any stock that you're covering for this week, and if you want to learn 90% off for those courses, big bit of thunder there, but 90% off for those courses. Get them while they last. It literally goes away in a week, and then those prices are going up. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for liking and subscribing. You guys are fantastic. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow morning and trading some stocks with you guys. Peace.